Welcome back, MTG Joe here, and today we're here for another weekly meta breakdown. This video is for Standard in particular. We'll have a separate video that you can find in the playlist for Historic as well as Alchemy. For those of you who are new, what we do here is every week look at the Arena Ladder meta breakdown for the top performing decks, kind of take a look to see if there's any new innovations, new decks, and kind of seeing if you want to rank up in Arena, what's the best way to do so, what are the best decks to do so. And the resource we're using to source the data is called UntapGG. It's the site we're using right now. It's a free-to-use companion tool that tracks a bunch of your games in terms of win rates, loss rates, which decks you're using, your collection. It suggests decks you can build, stuff of that nature. So we are using that. It's free to use, like I mentioned. The link is in the video description down below if you want to get started with that. And before we jump in, as always, if you do enjoy this content, greatly appreciated if you could drop a like, comment, and subscribe. All are free and easy ways to help support the channel. So jumping into Standard, we're going to look at Best of 1 first and then pop over to Best of 3. We are looking at this for the week of January 2nd to January 9th. And we are looking at the ranks of Platinum to Mythic, where we saw 98,000 games of Magic being played in Standard. So we're going to take a look first off at the win rates, and then we'll look at the most popular in terms of volume of decks. And number one, at almost the perfect nice score, basically 69%, is It Turns? And this particular version is very tuned, I would imagine, for Best of 1, in particular the mono-white matchup, which looks to be one of the highest represented decks in terms of just sheer volume of decks. In this particular version, the reason why is you see there's 4 Crush of the Week. This is a 3-mana board wipe that deals with all the weenie style effects, the tax style effects. You're also playing 8 bounce spells in the form of Fading Hope and Divide by Zero. You have the early Spike Field hazards, which can even deal with something as early as a Thalia on turn 2. And this version here is looking to obviously win through copying a bunch of turns with Galvanic Iteration and Alrund's Epiphany, with ramping out with Prismari Command and Unexpected Windfall. And then your top end is a Hullbreaker Horror and a single gold spend. You win with Birds or the Hall of the Storm Giants. So 69% for that particular list. We have the first version of Mono White. This version has the highest win rate, but is not the most represented version. And I'll get to that in a sec in terms of just sheer volume. So this one's a little bit heavier on the 1-drops. Interesting split of just 1 Monk of the Open Hands, 3 Stonebind Familiars, 3 Ushers. Some of the decisions here are a little interesting, but 160 matches played. No Thalia in this particular version either. Interesting, they're playing Dauntless Unity as a one-of, just a spell, kind of an Anthem style effect for the deck. That's an interesting inclusion for the deck there. This one's also a lot lower in terms of land counts. You usually see around 23 lands. Interesting, they're only on 21, and this with such a low land count, because you effectively need 6 lands to activate this. Seems a little ambitious, but it does have a higher win rate, but I think there's probably a better suited mono white deck. We see the Blood on the Snow decks. There's a bunch of different variations of these decks. This particular version is mono black. It's going up bigger with the Planeswalkers on the top end. Clear the board, reanimate with the treasure package, and Dorkos on the bottom end. Have our first iteration of mono green. This version, interesting. They're playing the 4 Cemetery Prowlers. 2 Lotus Cobras. They're not playing Sculptor of Winters in this particular list, but they are on Blizzard Brawl. Interestingly, 3 Snakeskin Veil just as protection, and then they're on the Rangers class, the Natural Growth package. We have Orzhov Controls. This is another version of the Blood on the Snow decks. This particular version is using Edgar Charmed Groom, as well as just some more learning through Professor of Symbology. You also get access to direct removal in Vanishing Verse. Lighter on the Planeswalkers, but this version here, you can have your Edgar die, get you tokens back, and kind of get value out of it that way. So this is what I was saying with the mono white, this version. So if we look at this mono white deck here, it's only 160 games played that was tracked for the week. This version has 3,700. So as a sample size, like at 160 games, like I have decks with that many games played. It's easy for one person to influence. You get more of a truer representation of a deck when you get to these larger numbers, just a larger sample size, more potential that you could run into, but also, like in this case here, there's likely a variety of players playing this deck at different skill levels. So you can kind of see, you know, people at a higher skill level, lower skill level, but the deck itself remains the same. So kind of interesting in that regard. In this version here, you have like your Hopeful Initiate, Usher the Fallen, just a tighter list. You have your Thalias. It's playing the one of Legion Angel on the top end and 23 lands, like I mentioned. This version's got the 5 exile effects in your creatures and the 2 portable holes. Another version of the mono black control, there's usually just slight variations. The other one had a Concealing Curtains. We see a Selesnya Humans list. So similar idea to the mono white deck, but you get a couple stompy elements. So you have something like Catilda that can pump the team and ramp you. Hamlet Vanguard at times, if you curve out 1-drop, 2-drop, this comes in as a 3-mana 5/5 with Ward. You have Torrens as a way to kind of go wide with tokens, and Sigarda as a way to kind of buff your team and provide card advantage. This version here, the only removal in the deck is the 3 Brutal Cathars and then 2 Kabira takedowns. We see another version of mono green. So this version is on the 4 Sculptors. It's playing up to Ren, Blizzard Brawls, still on the 4 Rangers class, but no Cemetery Prowler. This one looks like an older version of the list, to be honest. At the very least, a lot of the versions of the deck are playing Uvenwald Oddity. This card's very good in the deck. Just an aggressive threat that comes down with haste, and then late game is a mana sink to buff your team. Looking over, we see an Is Its Turns list. This version here, we have the Lier, Celestis. This one's probably not doing as well as the other one just because it plays pretty poor into like a mono white heavy meta. Stuff like Negates, not really that great. You could have like your Memory Deluge, but those will usually get taxed. You want to be on more sweepers. Only relying on one Cinderclasm isn't going to do a huge amount. So mono black control, we have the Orzhov's Cleric deck, just kind of like the life gain shell with Aura to get your Valkyrie back, or like your Voice of the Blessed, kind of life gain synergies. Mono red goblins, I say this every week, don't know how this deck wins games. It was awful when I played it, but it's a deck that could kind of maybe get under some people. Some versions of Is It Turns. We have Dimir Zombies, just kind of a zombie shell, interesting with Priest of Haunted Edge. Usually in these zombies lists, I like playing Meat Hook Massacre. Just your stuff's dying anyways, and it's a good mirror breaker. You get stuff back with like Archghoul or Headless Rider, so kind of some value here. Really quick, this is a good demo of Untapped. You could see, like, say I wanted to build this deck below, this Dimir control deck. I have all the cards. I could copy it and import it. With this particular list, I'm missing 2 Headless Riders in my collection, 3 Necro Dualities, so I would need 5 wild cards to craft it. So it's a good way to kind of see where things are at. So that's the best of 1 meta. Like I said, if we look at, instead of win rate, just matches, mono white's the most popular, and surprisingly, mono red goblins. It is a relatively cheap deck. I think that's probably why it's popular. It looks like it's only 4 rares to play the deck. It's just the Hobgoblin as the only rares in the deck, so it's a good budget deck if you want to get started in Standard. Just aggressively slanted, but we see like Is It Turns is pretty low just in terms. But that version that I shared at the beginning with the win rate, the 69% win rate, seems to be a really well-tuned best of 1 version of the deck, just to kind of sneak up and ramp up. So that's the deck there for best of 1. Popping over to best of 3. Same idea, January 2nd to January 9th. Actually went to gold rank here just to get a bigger population size. Standard, best of 3. So best of 3 win rates or matches in general tend to be a lot lower than best of 1. Best of 1, just from a sheer volume of games, is more popular. But in Standard, kind of overall seems to be kind of geared towards best of 1. We see mono green Stompy being the most popular. Pretty stock list. You see the Uvenwald, you see the Sculptor of Winters, so this is kind of the go-to configuration. You have your fight spells like Devouring Tendrils, as well as Inscription in the side. The Unnatural Growth to boost your team's power. We see mono white aggro, a couple different versions. This one looks to be on an extra 1-drop in Monk of the Hidden Hands, and then the Clarion Spirit, so kind of the cast 2 version of the deck. It's not on any of the Sun Gold Sentinels, and it's not on the Valorous stance. We see those in the sideboard, so some variation with the lists. We see Is It Turns, this version here only on a single gold spend, but lacks like not that many Fading Hopes. They are on 3 Burn Down the Houses, which is nice, but in some of the matches you can be dead before then, especially with the Thalia or Spellbinder tax. So having the cheaper like Cinderclasm is usually pretty good. And then we see Jund Midrange, which is mainly Rakdos Black-Red deck with kind of a treasure sub-theme, just good aggressive threats. Then you have a couple copies of Halana to buff your team, as well as Eska's Chariot. And then you're playing Path of Peril as an early sweeper, but with the treasure you get, you can also cleave cost it and just have it as a 6-mana sweeper. So that's pretty much it. Standards, generally speaking, not like super popular right now. Like even if we just look at every game that was played in a week, it doesn't go that much higher. Like from where we were at 12,000 games, and if we go down to bronze, it's only 13,000. So not huge difference in the game themselves. Even seeing, like if we take a quick look, just so standard best of ones 98,000. If we look at alchemy, so alchemy's 56, historic's 42. So standard best of ones still incredibly popular. If we look at best of 3, alchemy's half the amount, and historic's best of 1 is still the most played. So historic best of 3, we're seeing a lot more. Standard best of 1 is still the most popular of the formats themselves. In any case, gonna wrap this up. Thanks for watching. If you are interested in those other formats, I will have separate videos up in the next day or so from when you're watching this. You can always find those on the playlist, but each of these videos go up once a week with the respective format. As well as on the channel, we do a bunch of constructed content as well, primarily historic and alchemy right now, but in the present moment, I've really been big into cube. I've been enjoying that. So if you're unfamiliar with cube, how it plays out, stuff like that, I have a couple like full cube drafts, 7 wins, like trophy. I explain every thought process with why I chose cards, other options, stuff like that. So if you want to get into cubing and you want to kind of learn, there's some videos that you can check out there that are really good resources. And if you have any questions, deck lists, stuff like that, feel free to drop a comment. Try to answer as many of those as I can. Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a great one and stay safe out there.